And welcome back to the channel. This is Michael from TOEFLresources.com. And in today's video, I'm going to talk about how the speaking section of the TOEFL is scored by the graders at ETS. Now, before I get too much further into this video, I do want to say that this video isn't exactly necessary. To be honest, this topic is covered quite adequately in the official scoring rubrics published by ETS. So if you want to figure all this stuff out a lot faster, just check out the link to those rubrics I'm going to put in the description of the video. They're perfectly fine. However, along the course of the video, I am going to refer a few times to the TOEFL Teacher Manual, which is published by ETS and is provided to teachers at their various workshops and conferences. This book has a lot of sort of inside information and more detailed explanations of the scoring process. And hey, if you are a TOEFL teacher and you're watching this, I do encourage you to reach out to ETS to see if you can get a copy of the manual. It's quite handy. Anyways, in today's video, I'm going to start by talking about the 3 scoring dimensions. These are basically the 3 categories in which you are assessed when you deliver your answers. After that, I'll talk a little bit about the differences between how the independent and integrated speaking responses are graded, and then I am going to give you a ton of really boring mathematical stuff. Most of you will want to turn off the video at that point, but if you're a teacher, the part might actually be the most interesting because it'll tell you how some of these numbers that show up on the score reports are actually generated. So let's get started by talking about these 3 dimensions, these 3 categories. They are delivery, language use, and topic development. Now, starting with delivery. According to the manual, the 2 key features that characterize delivery are clarity of speech and pace. Now, clarity of speech, to be more specific, refers to pronunciation, stress, and intonation. Now, pronunciation should be pretty obvious. That's heavily dependent on your accent and how easily it is for you to be understood. Stress and intonation are a little bit more complicated, and I don't want to turn this into a teaching video, but basically stress refers to the emphasis of syllables within words, and intonation refers to the natural rising and falling of the English language when it's spoken. Now, stress and intonation are actually really hard to teach. I have a real tough time improving these in students. I will try to put a link down that might give you a few tips, but basically, people who have a very natural, native sounding voice have better stress and intonation. So those things make you sound very natural and confident. Next up, pace. Pace refers to the rate of speech, the length of your utterances, and your hesitancy and choppiness. Now, these are all the exact terms used in the manual. Now, rate of speech, in terms of TOEFL, really refers to the speed of your speech. Are you talking at a natural speed? You don't want to be too slow, nor do you want to be too fast. Now, I generally do encourage students to be a little bit faster than you would be in regular conversation, but if you go too fast, you're going to sound weird and it will be harder to understand you. Now, the length of utterances. When we study linguistics and language development, utterances has a lot of different meanings and not any of them is really clear. But in terms of TOEFL answers, length of utterances really refers to the length of your sentences. You don't want a lot of really, really short sentences, nor do you want really long, awkward sentences. You're aiming for a sweet spot, which is very natural. Hesitancy, choppiness, that's pretty easy to understand. If you have a lot of long pauses in the middle of sentences or long pauses between words where you're trying to think of something, that's going to lower your score. And choppiness pretty much means the same thing. Also, you're going to lose points if you have a lot of and ah and kinds of moments. Likewise, too, if you make a mistake and you go back and fix that mistake, that's going to count as some amount of choppiness. So that's something you want to avoid. Again, to quote the manual, level 4 delivery, that's the best, is characterized by speech that is generally clear and uses stress and intonation patterns effectively. Mostly fluid speech is sustained. However, on the other hand, the speech in low-level responses tends to be fragmented and contains long pauses, or it may be mostly unintelligible due to serious pronunciation difficulties. Now, I do want to emphasize at this point in the video that you can make a few mistakes and still get a top score. You don't have to be perfect. You can have some native language influences on your pronunciation. It's not going to hurt you unless it's quite serious. Likewise, you can make a few stress and intonation errors when you speak. Heck, if you watch this video carefully, you probably notice even I now and then have weird stresses and weird intonations. And hey, sometimes I stop to think about what I'm going to say next. So it's okay to have a few of these errors in your answer. Next up is language use. Again, quoting from the teacher's manual, the most salient features pertaining to language use at the highest level are the efficiency of word choice and grammatical structures to convey meaning and the automaticity with which they are created. So what does this mean, efficiency of word choice? Well, that means, can you say what you want to say without using a whole lot of unnecessary words? Now listen to this. I could say, my phone cost me a lot of money. That's 7 words, and they're all kind of basic level words. They're not very advanced. But I could just say, my phone was expensive. That's 4 words, and I would say expensive is a more advanced word than anything in the first sentence. So it's more efficient. I'm able to say the same thing with fewer words, and I'm able to convey just as much meaning. So that's something you need to keep in mind. That shows off that you have a stronger vocabulary, and on the other hand, it's also going to give you more time to include details later in your answer. Likewise, here's another example. He listened to everything that was said in class. Okay, he listened to everything that was said in class. I think that's 9 words. How about this? He was attentive in class. That's 5 words. It has that amazing vocabulary term, attentive. It's much more efficient. It's going to be higher scoring. And the automaticity, that's a tough one, just refers to how quickly and naturally you can actually come up with these structures. And so in terms of grammatical structures, again, you want to be using the right tenses and the right sentence forms to convey your thoughts. So instead of having like 2 long, simple sentences, you want to combine them into one more concise compound sentence. That reduces your number of words and it makes your grammar much more efficient, but it will convey the same meaning. So again, to quote from the manual, what stands out in a level 4 response are a control of a wide range of vocabulary and a comfort with a variety of structures. So you also need to convey that you're comfortable using advanced grammar and advanced vocabulary. Quite challenging, isn't it? To quote later on, moving down the scale to lower scoring answers, word choice becomes less efficient and more vague. It takes more words to convey the same information. A smaller range of vocabulary and structures is evident. There are frequent repetitions. So another thing to keep in mind is you don't want to needlessly repeat words. Use a wide range of vocabulary. So it's very challenging, isn't it? Your vocabulary needs to be both efficient and wide-ranging. What a challenge. What a challenge. No kidding, this is a difficult test. And no kidding that even native speakers, when they go down to the test center, often do not get perfect scores. This is a real pain in the ass. Okay, number 3, topic development, specifically in the independent speaking question. which on the new TOEFL is simply question number 1. There's just one of them now. So quoting from the manual, topic development is characterized by the fullness of content provided in the response and its overall coherence. At the highest level, responses address the tasks by clearly communicating a point of view and providing well-supported reasons or explanations with some elaboration. Ideas progress smoothly, making the response easy to follow. So what does this mean exactly? Well, if you read it very carefully, it hints at the kind of structure you need in your answers. So let's look at it kind of like word by word. It clearly communicates a point of view. It clearly communicates a point of view. That means you need a clear thesis. You need a clear main point. You need an answer to the prompt. Next, it provides well-supported reasons or explanations. So you need reasons for your main point. Now, note that it uses the plural form, reasons or explanations. This tells me that you probably need 2 reasons. 1 reason, not enough. And then look at the next part, with some elaboration. So not only do you need to give 2 reasons, but you need to elaborate on those reasons. You need to say why you believe those. So again, to repeat, you need a main point, you need some reasons, you need some elaboration. If you check out my video on speaking question 1, it talks all about this stuff. So I will put a link to that in the description as well. Now, again, it wants your ideas to progress smoothly, making the response easy to follow. Again, that's the sort of thing that can be achieved by using a nice template or a kind of structural plan. So again, that is in my guide to the first speaking question. To quote the manual again, moving down the scale, fewer supporting details and less elaboration are evident. Ideas are very general and vague. So again, a lower scoring answer will maybe not have the explanations or the details. It might have the main point, it might have the reasons, but it won't elaborate on the reasons. So it's gonna kind of be like half an answer. Now, the topic development for the integrated speaking, that's a little bit different. So let's quote again from the manual. Topic development is characterized by the accuracy and completeness of the content provided in the response and its overall coherence. And I'll just continue along with the quote. At the highest level, responses address the tasks by presenting relevant information from the reading and listening, and organizing it in a way that makes it easy for the listener to follow the progression of ideas. Responses provide the major information requested as well as some supporting detail or elaboration on the topic. So what the heck does this mean? Well, accuracy and completeness of the content. That one I think should be obvious. So when it comes to integrated speaking questions, the details you take from like the reading or the listening part need to be accurate and correct. Not only that, but you need to get all of the information from those sources that is required. Likewise, it needs to be coherent. It needs to have a nice flow. It needs to be presented in a way that the grader has an easy time understanding you. And again, that's the sort of thing that I talk about in all my videos about the individual questions, so check them out. Now, but note the last part of this quote. It provides the major information requested, okay, we know that, as well as some supporting detail or elaboration on the topic. This means that you might need a little bit more than what is specifically asked for in the prompt. So sometimes I'll get a student who's answering like the type 2 question or the type 3 question, and they're like, well, you know, the prompt doesn't specifically ask me to summarize the reading. like in type 3, right? They'll say, the prompt is only specifically asking me to summarize the lecture, so I'm just going to ignore the reading part. Well, no. Even in that case, you should probably mention the reading part because the manual is asking for the additional supporting details or elaboration. So again, you can deal with this aspect of the grading by following the templates in my guides for each speaking question. Moving on to quote the manual again. Moving down the scale, fewer supporting details and less elaboration are evident, generally with more omissions and inaccuracies. The amount of content decreases and the response may become somewhat repetitive. Okay, so that's pretty obvious. A lower scoring answer has fewer details, it has less of that additional information, and it will have inaccurate details from the sources. Now, that's all there is for the grading. Those are the 3 areas you're graded on. Each one is equal, and you get a score between 1 and 4 or a 0 in each of them. Now, let's talk about the boring math stuff, about how all of that is kind of converted to a number that shows up on your score report. But I do want to mention this is really, really fucking boring. And honestly, just you should probably turn off the video at this point. This is dumb stuff. But anyways, if you're going to stick around, here's what you need to know about these numbers. So each of your 4 questions is scored by 2 different human graders. They each give you a score of between 1 and 4 for each of the questions. Or they'll give you a 0, of course, if you say nothing or it's just like nonsense. This is called the rubric score. Usually, your final rubric score for each question is the average of the 2 scores you're given. However, if there is a big difference between the graders, like I think if the difference is more than 2, then the scoring leader, who is a supervisor, he comes in and he picks one. Because if there's a big difference, it means that one of the graders kind of messed up. And so the supervisor has to come in and clean up the mess. So do you realize how boring this part is yet? And this is like just the beginning. Let's continue. Now, the score for each question is converted from the rubric score to a scaled score from between 0 and 30. You see on the score report, you're getting a score between 0 and 30, right? Now, your 4 scaled scores are then averaged, and that becomes your final speaking score. However, the scaling process is quite troublesome. Why, you ask? Well, over here on the left-hand side of the screen is the old chart that ETS used to provide to convert between the rubric score and the scaled score. Now, this chart was first published when the IABT launched in 2005, and ETS has kind of covered it up. They've buried it down the memory hole. They don't use it anymore, and it's not listed on their website anywhere, and it's not listed in the official guide. Basically, it's no longer accurate, and it's no longer used. A lot of websites and teachers still refer to it, but I guarantee you 100%, this is the one thing I know, it's not used anymore. Like, by the way, I could be wrong about everything in this video, like, I'm only human, but this much I know, the chart is out of date. And that's a good thing, because the chart, if you look at it very close, the math is not right. The rubric to scaled conversions, they're not mathematical, so something was going wrong in there. But now, the good news is that it seems that the conversion is now strictly mathematical. So basically, you take the rubric score, you divide it by 4, you multiply it by 30, and that gets you a scaled score. So you don't even need a chart. You can just do the math, right? Now, that formula, I didn't double check it. Like, I'm not a mathematician, but basically, it's a strictly mathematical conversion. Now, there is one more caveat. Your final scaled score, like for all of them together, all four, it could be adjusted up or down by ETS if the test was determined to be too hard or too easy in a given week. So say your real score is like 25, right? But if ETS has decided, oh shit, the test was too easy this week, they might just nudge it down to 24. Or if they thought, hey, the test was too hard, they're going to nudge it up to 25. Could happen. And I've had pretty much sort of unofficial confirmation from ETS about this point. That's something they kind of keep close to their chest, though. Now, the other thing I want to point out is on that old version of the conversion chart, certain speaking scores were impossible. You can see that 25 was impossible when this chart was made. Now, however, students do get 25, and they have been getting 25 for about the past year, maybe year and a half. The same thing, by the way, with the writing conversion chart. That's totally out of date, and it's been out of date since like 2011. So just pay no attention to that whatsoever. A few final boring details. On the old version of the TOEFL before August 1st, 2019, the same grader could have graded 2 of your 6 responses. Now, I don't know about the new test, but I'm guessing it's probably the same, that 2 of your responses could be graded by the same person. I hope that's not the case, but it could be. I do want to note the graders are all based in the USA. There's no Canadians and no British people grading your work. However, some of them could be non-native speakers, as long as they have a university degree from an American university. Lastly, if you do request a rescore, the graders doing it will know that it is a rescore request, but they will not know the original score you were given. All right, that's all I have to say about that. You'll forgive me for the complicated math stuff. If that was unclear to you, just leave a question down below and I'll try to kind of make it a bit more clear, if possible. Likewise, I hope that the stuff about the scoring dimensions and the categories was a lot more useful. If you have any questions or you want me to check the manual for any more specific stuff, I'll do that. Just leave a request down below. All right, that is all I want to mention now, but thanks again for watching all the way to the end. I'll see you next week with a new video, guys. Take care until then.